This weekend I raced in my first ever crit race down in London at the Via Atelier Criterium event. Now this was a 3-day event, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, consisting of a range of different races on this 1 kilometre circuit through King's Cross. Now if you aren't aware what a crit race is, neither was I till quite recently, but this is the official definition. So it's a cycling race that requires a blend of fitness and strategy. Racing laps on a closed circuit. Criterium courses are typically about a mile long and feature 2 to 6 turns whilst avoiding any significant climbs. And that describes the course at Via Atelier pretty accurately, except I think there's probably more corners than that, and it was only about 1 kilometre in distance. So I was down at the event with Rysel, who are my new bike sponsor. Still can't quite believe that one's happened. In this video I'm going to go through my experience down at the Via Atelier event, covering some of the races, what I got up to, and then we're going to go through my race, which was the most humbling experience of my entire life. So let's get into it. So I made my way down from Manchester to London on the train with the bike on the Friday morning, and as soon as I got there I headed over to King's Cross to see what was going on at the actual gaff. Met the Van Rysel team, who was still busy setting everything up at the stand because the event didn't start for another couple of hours, and then I made my way over to the Via coffee shop. Now this is a sick shop. If you are in the area around King's Cross, I would highly recommend going checking it out if you are into cycling or decent coffee. Basically a bike shop, they got loads of cool stuff on display and they make a decent brew as well. It's these guys who are pulling the strings behind the scenes to organise this big event basically. The agenda for the Friday evening, which is when the event officially started, was a couple of community fun races basically, where anyone could just show up and have a few laps just for fun, and then we went into the first official races of the weekend, which started with the fixed gear races, which is absolutely ludicrous to me. People can race on fixies, most of which just didn't even have any brakes, on a course that is that sort of techie and tight. It's crazy. But as you can imagine, it made for some sick viewing. This was the first real opportunity I had to check out the racing and get a feel for what it was going to be like, look at the course from different angles and stuff like that, and capture a bit of the content. And let me say, I was shocked at how quick they were going on the fixed gear bikes with no brakes. It was just outrageous to have the minerals to be going that quick around the course that's pretty technical and tight and stuff in parts was just ludicrous to me, absolutely ludicrous. But inevitably with that does come risk. So there was a couple of pretty bad crashes in the fixed gear races that spooked me out. I was already nervous, and then seeing the crashes like that made me even more nervous, but I guess it's part and parcel of racing a fixed gear bike especially, and just crit racing in general. So once all the fixed gear racing was out the way, I stuck around for the final race of the day, which was the category 3/4 race, and this was now the one I was most interested in because I was going to be racing in a category 3/4 race the next day. So I obviously wanted to see how intense it was going to be, what the riders were going to be like, just to get a feel for it. So I had some semblance of an idea as to what I was going to get myself into the next day. Now, if you aren't aware, again, to race at an event like this is supported by the British Cycling event. You have to register or become a member, day pass, whatever it is, with British Cycling to be able to actually enter the event. Now, the way they rank the riders is category 4 is the entry level for anyone racing. So for me, just signing up, I was put into a category 4, and category 3 are a little better all the way through to category 1, who I think are like borderline elites. Don't quote me on that, I'm not an expert in this. But basically, the lower the category you're in, the better the rider you are, and 4 is the entry level. And it was only when I started watching this Cat 3/4 race that I realised these do not look like entry-level riders. These look like seasoned pros compared to me, who has been riding for about 8 months properly. So I went home that night basically even more apprehensive than I was before I'd arrived. Now, day 2 started with the Brompton World Championships. Now, I believe this is the biggest Brompton race in the whole world. It was absolutely ludicrous how many Bromptons were there. I did not realise they had such a cult following like that. And in hindsight, this was the event I probably should have done. It looked fun, friendly, and people were dressed in ridiculous suits, but still drilling it around the circuit on these Bromptons. So I spent the morning watching all the heats, and then the eventual Brompton World Champ was crowned, and I am now seriously in the market for a Brompton. Now my race wasn't until 4:45 in the afternoon, so I had a lot of time for the anxious feelings to just build and build and build whilst watching all of the other events that were going ahead prior to mine. So I went and got all my kit on, sorted my bib number and that sort of jazz, and then I went over my bike a couple of times just to make sure it was A-okay. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I was absolutely bricking it. I really was, just because we had seen a lot of crashes out there in the races prior to mine. Felt like there was a crash or two every single race.
About 40 minutes away from the race and feel pretty good so far. Quite nervous just looking how quick people were going in the Cat 3 and 4s last night, but I'm just going to go at my own thing. I get dropped, and eventually by the time the first person starts lapping me, it's going to look like I'm up front anyway, so that's the strategy really. The winner of the race as well also gets this frame. So if that isn't an incentive to gun it, and I don't know what is.
And the main issue for me was, because we were riding with the Cat 3s and the Cat 4s, I didn't want to get in anyone's way and cause a crash or come off myself, as I am not in the business of breaking bones during my Ironman training block. And there was a lot of tight, techie corners on the course, and I'm not necessarily so used to group riding in general, let alone at high intensity. So there's just a couple of things on my mind that I was starting to worry about, basically, let's say that. So after we had collected our chips and put them on the bikes and that, we were stood just waiting to get onto the course with the other riders. I got chatted to a couple of them. There were a few other people who were doing their first crit, it would be their first experience doing this sort of thing as well, which was good. And also talking to some of the more experienced riders, it just helped calm some nerves as well, because they was pretty sound people. Obviously everyone's got to start somewhere. At some point they were probably shitting themselves on the start line. Some of the riders who were like Cat 3s and that have been doing it for donkey's years, you know what I mean, like they grow up racing and stuff like that, so they are very comfortable in this environment. I had a quick glance round at the rest of the field who we were going to be racing against. Not a leg hair in sight, mate. I was the only person on that start line with leg hair, and that's when I started to think I am so far out of my depth. And that was confirmed immediately as I was dropped in the first 50 metres of the race once it started. So we did have a sight and lap to kick things off, but that was nowhere near enough for me to get comfortable with the corners and that sort of thing on the course. So my approach from the get-go was start at the back, take a few tentative laps, catch back onto the group, and then start drilling it a bit more once I'm more comfortable with the corners and the lines and that sort of stuff. I didn't quite pan out like that because everyone just started drilling it right off the start line, so I found myself immediately dropped, and that set the tone for the rest of the race pretty much. First few laps were just bedlam. I couldn't get over how intense it was. I thought it would sort of ease into it, but it was just 100,000,000% straight off the bat. And I was in dead last, trying to close the gap between me and the second to last guy, putting out really decent power by my standards, and just nothing was giving. I just couldn't close the gap for the first few laps, so I was just riding in the back on my own. Now, let's have it real here. I knew full well going into it I was going to be toward the back, if not very last. I didn't expect to have to go that hard in the first 5 minutes and still not be able to close the gap between me and the second to last guy. It was ridiculous. And that's when I realised this is going to be a seriously long, grueling day, because the way the course is, it's basically a sprint. Freewheel around the corner. A sprint. Freewheel around the corner, a sprint. It's just like an intense, long interval session where I was putting out like 500-600 watts every time I was coming out of a corner. And obviously the more experienced riders are taking better lines than me. They're not losing as much momentum in the corners as I was. I was just basically out there riding by myself, killing myself, and still in last place. It was very demoralising to begin with, I gotta say. But after a couple of laps, I did start to get a little bit more comfortable with things. I started throwing the bike around the corners a bit more, just learning more about my limits and how far over I can lean. Spent the last few weeks weeks riding that Van Rysel RCR, which is the base model, which is a serious bit of kit as well, by the way. It felt incredible. And eventually, after about 8 laps or so, I had finally caught the wheel of the second to last guy. I think he'd gone out a bit hard and started blowing. I mean, I was blowing too at that point, but I think he was blowing a little bit harder. Smart thing for me to do would have been to sit on his wheel for a bit and just recover, get a bit of rest by it where I could. But instead, my ego took over and I just razzed past him. And then I was back to riding on my own again because the group had separated from me and him as well. Rookie move. But yeah, after about 15 laps, I have to say, I was fucking loving it. It was absolutely sensational. Razzing it full gas around this little circuit. The crowd was mad. The actual course itself I really enjoyed, and I found a bit of comfort on all the corners now. I knew what I was doing basically, and what my limits were, how quick to go into the corners, and I was gradually getting a bit more confident going through them and stuff like that as well. Had witnessed a couple of people crash out and DNF, but I was feeling all right myself. The nerves had stopped a little bit, although my heart rate was just in space the entire time. My average heart rate for the event was 184 beats per minute. Now if you've ridden a bike, you know 184 beats on a bike is a pretty high heart rate to have in general, let alone over 42 minutes. Now, this was recorded on my Garmin chest strap as well. Now this ain't no wristwatch HR monitor. This was legit, and it spoke to the levels of effort I was having to put in throughout the whole thing. For any runners watching, I would say it was pretty comparable to a 5-kilometer race in terms of there is just no respite. It was just from the gun, absolutely balls to the wall. Basically, I was in the red from the get-go is what I was trying to say, and on my head unit I didn't have the duration or the time that we'd been actually racing, so all I had was like the speed, my average power and that sort of stuff, no time. At this point I was out there dead in the saddle basically. My legs were on fire, just screaming at me. The lactic acid was building beyond belief. It was absolutely killing me. And the race was meant to be 45 minutes, and then there's 5 laps after that to determine who the winner is. So I was thinking, can't be that long left now. I must have been going for about 40 minutes, maybe a couple more minutes left. And then one of the lads from the Via coffee shop who was racing, he'd lapped me. So I asked him how long we'd been going, thinking, say like 40 minutes, just a few minutes left sort of thing. And I simply could not quite believe what he said in response.
How long have we been going? 26. Fuck off. No, we've not.
We were only just over halfway. I literally could not believe it. I thought he was pranking me, but he wasn't. We'd done 26 minutes. Still had at least 20 minutes to go. I couldn't get over it. It was killing me. That really hurt morale. So I got my head down and just kept drilling it as long as I could, basically. That's one of the things I was most pleased with. I didn't let up once throughout the whole thing, other than when we had to slow down for the crashes. They basically wave the red flag when there's been a crash, so you slow down, and obviously the aim is not to go into the back of the other person. So that was the only time I had some respite. And my heart rate dipped down to I think about 175 beats for a couple of seconds. So I'm about 35, maybe 40 minutes in here, getting lapped again by the leaders of the Cat 3, who are basically racing for the win at this point. Was lapped by them about 4, 5, maybe even 6 times at this point. It was ridiculous. They were just absolute demons. And this was the main thing that made me, as a newbie crit racer, uncomfortable. So this isn't against anyone else, by the way. This is how it's meant to be. I just felt uncomfortable with it. So when the leaders were coming in hot behind you, they'll give you a shout like on your right, on your left, etc. So the right thing to do and the safe thing to do is for me to slow down and let them fucking demons just pass by. So that's what I did. Every single time I got a shout from someone on your right, on your left, I sort of slowed down just a touch.
Left, left, left. Yeah, thank you.
and let them pass, because they're racing competitively, I am not. So on the straight sections of the course, that's absolutely sound. They'll just pass me, I don't even have to slow down. Where I found it quite awkward, or I just didn't have enough experience to know really what to do, was when we were both approaching a corner. So I am riding on the left hand side of the road. The lead group of whatever it is, 5, 6, 7, 8 people are riding on the right, are coming into the same corner at the same time. So I'm getting spanked, but bear in mind I'm still hitting 35, 40 k's an hour as we approach this corner, so I can't just completely stop. And yeah, I just felt a little bit like I was getting in their way, because obviously the ideal for them is to go out wide and swing in to the left, but I'm on the left hand side approaching the corner, too quick to stop. So I have to take a hideous line, and felt like I was getting in the way. I don't really know what he meant to do in situations like that, because like I said, I can't just come to a complete stop. But yeah, after 42 minutes of intense burning in my legs, my lungs were done. I was done at that point, absolutely done. I was approaching the corner, and a big train of the lead group were coming to my right again, gave me a shout. I either had the option to sprint and come into the corner about 100 miles an hour, probably crash into the barrier, or get in one of their way, or just stop and let them all pass. So I decided to slam the brakes on, smartest thing to do, and the safest thing to do again, and I just came to a complete stop. And then that's when I decided, I'm done, I can't be arsed starting again. I've done 42 minutes, covered about 22 kilometres at an average pace of nearly 32 k's an hour, I think, which is decent going considering you're freewheeling into the corners and then sprinting again and then slowing down for the corners, etc. So yeah, I just walked off the course at that point. The marshals let me out, and that was my first crit race experience.
This is me after my first crit race. That was an experience, let me tell you that. My glutes have never felt pain like it. It was horrific pain, but it was really good fun as well. So here's Max, he did his first one as well. How'd you go?
That was hard work, but I did find that all you had to worry about was like the bike in front. You know, a lot of your like anxiety disappears because you're just like, oh well, there's a bike in front of me. I just got to try and stay behind him. But that takes a lot of watts.
He lapped me 2 times as well, so I don't talk to him anymore now.
So overall, I was pretty pleased with how it went. I'm a big advocate these days for doing things that make you uncomfortable, and this was definitely one of them. And I left that race feeling a little bit more confident on the bike as well, which is good. But yeah, I've got quite a bit of work to do to be able to even compete with the Cat Force, so we'll see how we go with that one, because I'd definitely like to do another one in the future. Just need to spend a bit more time on the bike. And then after my race, we got to witness some of the absolute freaks of nature who were racing in the elite races. There was a men's and women's elite race. There was some really big hitters in these events as well, and watching these guys absolutely slam it around the course that I'd just ridden at paces that I couldn't even fathom was pretty eye-opening as well. Like, there are just levels to this sport, as there is with many sports like running as well. The people at the top of the game are just like aliens compared to the normal people like myself who are doing it. Just look at the speed some of these people are going at. It is outrageous. Was just sick. Overall, I just really enjoyed my couple of days there. And on the final day, to top it all off, the icing on the cake, I got to collect my brand new Rysel RCR Pro. quick overview on the specs. So like I said, this is the RCR Pro version. So the frame is the same as the World Tour spec, basically. It's going to be the same frame as the AG2R team are riding in the Tour de France next week. And as such, the bike weighs absolutely niche. I think it's about 7.2 kilograms in a size medium. This is a size large, so it'd probably be a bit more than that. Comes with Ultegra C36 carbon wheels, Michelin Power Cup 28mm tyres. It can take up to 33mm though. And they are tubeless ready. The group set is Shimano Ultegra Di2. It'll be my first time running Shimano. Everything I've had in the past is SRAM, so I'm quite excited to see how Shimano compares. As you would expect, everything is carbon on this thing, and it comes with a power sensor included in the crank. Now, it retails at $5.5 grand, which is obviously still a massive chunk of cash, but for the spec, compared to the rest of the market, it is actually very good value. But I can't give you a proper review on it yet. I have only been out on 2 rides on it so far. However, I will make a video after I've done a bit more mileage on it to review some thoughts on it and just let you know what I think of the bike, because I am so excited to be riding this thing for the year. And not that it counts for much, but the aesthetics on this thing, this carbon black colourway is just legit. That is all I've got for you today now. Thank you if you have watched this far, and stay tuned for the bike review and potentially again at some point in the near future some more crit racing content. Nice one.